Good evening. No, you're good. All right. So, what are we supposed to be talking about today? No, oh, the Bible. Okay. So we are. Oh, look at that! I just got a notification that Exalt Church is live. Should be. I don't want to watch them though right now, so it's good. All right. So we are. We're starting where we left off last week. 1 Samuel 14, verse 24. We've just kind of as a recap, if you weren't here last week, Jonathan and his shield bearer went and asked God to basically deliver the Philistines into their hands in a small battle. We found out that the names of two rocky crags didn't mean anything, and that there's a couple of other things that went on. And so now we're at the spot that the battle has started, increased, and that the Israelites have started to join Jonathan and his shield bearer. So now it comes to a part where I get to quote one of my favorite people. And verse 24, it talks about, but the men of Israel were hard pressed that day because Saul had put the people under a curse, saying, "Cursed be the man who eats food before evening, and before I have taken vengeance on my enemies." So none of the people ate any food. And now is my quote by S.M. Hudson. Saul is a selfish jerk. Okay, so that is a quote straight from Pastor Sean's notes. He said, "Here, I got some notes on this already because I was planning on doing 15, so I had already started doing 15, and then we didn't even make it halfway through 14, so that's why I'm taking over there." So he gave me his notes. I ended up not really looking at them too much, but I saw that at the top of his notes, and I said, I kind of have to use this, right? Like, this is important stuff here. Saul is a selfish jerk. So, as we continue on, I'm gonna come back to the fact that he was a jerk here in just a second. So, all of the people of the land came to a forest, and there was honey on the ground. When the people entered the forest, the honey was dripping, but no man put his hand to his mouth to taste it, because the people feared the oath of Saul. First off, I gotta ask, has anybody ever seen honey just pooling on the ground? You have. Where did you see this at? So, a honey tree. Okay. I was going to say, I've never heard of a honey tree. Is this something, I am like, I want one of these. I thought there was always bees involved, so. So did you you didn't try it? Why not? You were afraid of the bees. But it was a small. Has anybody else seen it? No? Okay. Well, Mary, you are blessed and highly favored. I mean, don't forget. I mean, we are in the promised land, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Exactly, flowing with milk and honey. So you've got to imagine that the spies had to have seen something like this. Otherwise, you wouldn't get the report back that it's flowing with milk and honey. So, and then the other thing that I kind of thought was interesting was, I'm kind of one of those like history, like war buff, like type of things, right? So I always think of this as like, so you've got the army, right? They're chasing the Philistines. So the Philistines had to have gone through here first, right? So the Philistines are going through and they're getting routed by the Israelites. And the Philistines had been fighting all day, but they probably took the time to stop and eat and refresh themselves as they go on to battle. So the thing that I wanted to kind of point out was this is why Saul is a jerk, right? He stops his soldiers from stopping to eat, to stop them from nourishing themselves. And as we go on, right, it goes through and it says, but Jonathan had not heard when his father put the people under the oath. So he put out the end of his staff that was in his hand and dipped it in a honeycomb. Then he put his hand to his mouth, and his energy was restored, or his eyes were brightened, right, is what one translation says. So the idea that Jonathan knew that he had been fighting all day, and that he knew that he needed to restore himself to be able to continue on. He didn't know about this oath, but he knew, he was wise enough, he's been in enough battles to know that you can't keep fighting and go through that. Can somebody look up Judges 8, 4 and 5? Anybody want to volunteer? Tara, I see you looking. All right. She's good. Oh, if you have it, go ahead. Okay. Judges 8, 4, and 5.
I got it.
Okay.
And Gideon came to Jordan and crossed over, the Jordan probably.
Yeah.
He and 300 men who were with him, exhausted yet pursuing. So he said to the men of Sukkot, please give loaves of bread to the men who follow me, for they are exhausted, and I am pursuing after Zeba and Zolomon, the kings of Midian.
Okay. So here you have half the amount of men, right? Because we know that the Israelites had an army of about 600 men, and they were pursuing. But you see Gideon has half the amount of men, and he's pursuing his enemy, and he takes the time to look after his soldiers and say, I know they're going to be exhausted. We're not going to stop running, but we're going to at least eat something while we're pursuing, because otherwise we're going to be famished. He's a smart leader. He's actually considerate of the people. And even so much so that Jonathan in verse 29 says, then Jonathan says, my father has troubled the land with this foolish curse. See how my energy is restored because I tasted a little of the honey? How much better it would have been if only the people had eaten freely today from the spoil of their enemies, which they found. For now the slaughter among the Philistines has not been great. Okay, so right, Saul is his own worst enemy for sure.
Because, I mean, not taking care of them, they were not at their best. All he had in his mind was his reputation and his vengeance. Very narcissistic. And it makes me think, we watched the coronation, and there's one part where King Charles is sitting there, and he says, he's a king, and he says, for I have come to serve, not to be served.
Mm-hmm.
He said that from his mouth, and I thought, man, I hope he means it.
Sure.
We'll see.
Right.
But I mean, that's the idea, and he's not thinking at all about his people.
Right, and if we go back up into what the actual curse is, it says, cursed be the man who eats food before evening, and before I have taken vengeance on my enemies. It doesn't say anything about our enemies or the enemies of God or anything like that. Yes, sir.
Well, it is interesting to think about how that does hurt his crew. Like, it is unwise. Because I think that selfish mentalities are actually self-destructive in a way. Even like selfish people, I know people who are selfish in a way that they're always very fit, they're very orderly, they're very organized and stuff. And so in a way, they're doing what needs to be the healthy thing for them, but in the end, actually, there's something that is deficient because they're not accepting that they are insufficient.
Right.
And so there's always going to be deficiencies when you're selfishly minded.
Exactly. For sure. Okay. We're going to come back to the vow. I'm going to talk about it again because it's definitely important, because as we continue to read, it's going to be brought back up. So let's go into, let me see, do I have anything for that? No, okay. So, verse 31. They struck the Philistines that day from Michmash to Ajalon, and the people were very tired. When night came and the oath ended, the people rushed greedily upon the spoil. They took sheep, oxen, and calves and slaughtered them on the ground, and they ate them raw with the blood still in them. Then Saul was told, "Look, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating the meat with the blood." And he said, "You have violated the law and acted treacherously. Roll a stone to me today," Saul said. "Spread out among the people and tell them, each of you bring me his ox or sheep and butcher it properly here and eat. And do not sin against the Lord by eating the meat with blood." Okay, so why is this a sin? I like steak rare, but this is not the same as eating it raw and with blood, okay? Not the same thing. It's a different type of thing. I forget what it's actually called. The juiciness of a steak is not actually blood. It's another thing. But why is this a sin? There's life in the blood. But why? Is it definitely a sin? Yes, it was part of the commandments. Very good. I wanted to see if you were somebody pastor's wife, right? So could somebody look up Deuteronomy 12:16? It's going to be 16 through 27. So if you'd like to read, now's your chance. Through 27. I said it's a lot. What verse are you at right now? Okay, we're going to skip. Okay, you can take a breath there. So, it goes on to say in verse 20, you can say, "I will eat meat," because you want to eat meat, but then it says again, it says over and over again, I didn't count how many times, but it's several times, at least 4 times in Deuteronomy 12 that says, "Don't eat the meat with the blood." So, I did that as an example that the Israelites knew not to do this, right? This is not something that they were, but again, the curse made the Israelites famished. So much so, I can only imagine swinging a sword, running, doing all these things, or not even swords, because they didn't even really have swords. They used makeshift weapons, and they're going through, and they're just exhausting themselves, and they finally get to a spot where they can stop because the sun has set. They can now eat something, and all they have is animals, right? And you're going, and you're just like, I guess this is how we're doing this. And so you go, and is there any hunters? Anybody hunt? You hunt, Jason. Have you field dressed an animal?
Yes.
Why do you field dress an animal? Now, explain what field dressing is first.
Taking out the guts and the innards, and you have to do that quickly. If not, it spoils the meat.
But why?
What's that?
Why does it spoil the meat?
Oh, because of what's inside the bile.
Right. So there's that, and there's also the blood itself actually if the blood is stuck inside of the animal, it actually spoils, it coagulates it changes the taste of the meat. It makes it more irony, and it also can actually spoil faster. Now, we have refrigerators, right? We have a great refrigeration system. We know how to do all this. Israel, not so many refrigerators back then, right? So the fact that they were doing this, now, how do you field dress an animal? Like, do you just do it right there on the ground?
Yeah.
You do? Okay, I've seen where they always hang them, right?
You remove the innards first,
Right,
and then you hang them.
right, exactly. So we get through here. So first off, they're not supposed to do this on the ground because the blood pools, because of whatever, and then so they're always supposed to be able to drain the blood. So on a stone, on a large stone, means that they can hang it off and they could drain the blood better and go from there. I know this is kind of a gross topic. If you haven't had dinner yet, I apologize, but you know, that's the way that they did this thing. I actually read, like, as I was studying and doing things, I was like, oh, let's field dressing an animal, and I kind of looked and I was watching some stuff, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. So I've never field dressed an animal. I've gone hunting. I've helped with things. That's the one thing I've never done. So one day.
Doesn't this sound like that it was more than just one day?
Um,
You would not get that hungry. So down here it said, before the evening, what was that? Or, before the evening, before I avenge myself on my enemies. So could that have, I wonder if that could not have gone more than just one day, if it's that hungry.
well, I would. Let me ask you a question then, Mary. You used to live on a farm. Yeah. Your mom and dad, your dad especially. If your dad was out working all day.
But he would not have slaughtered a cow to eat.
Okay, but he also had lunch and breakfast in the morning probably, right?
Well, he still wouldn't have done it.
Okay.
You don't get that ravenous in one day if you're gonna be like
Okay.
acting like a wild animal.
Yeah, but it says at the beginning when he gave him this, it said do not
Right.
eat, and then they found the honey. You can't say that the people weren't disciplined, they were soldiers.
Right.
Because it says not one of them ate that honey that was just laying there.
Correct.
And it says that already they were feeling famished, even at that point, and yet they obeyed him.
Right, because we.
Except for the one that didn't hear the whole
Right, Jonathan. Yeah.
yeah, so then they went ahead and chased and fought and got somewhat of a victory. So that in itself would drain you. I mean, what I'm trying to say is Saul should be held in account because he's the one who set the guys up for this.
Right. So we're gonna go back to that here in a second. But to answer your question, did somebody else have their hand up that I didn't see?
Well, I was just gonna say, they're also not in their own lands.
Well, they are technically in their homeland, but they're oppressed by the Philistines. So we don't know what their normal dietary units are, or you know, anything like that. They're hiding right now. It even says that they had been hiding in holes and hiding from the Philistines. So we don't know when their last meal was, really, right? So it didn't say like, oh, you know, they were just, you know, out. They just had breakfast and they had 11 Z's or whatever it is. You know, they didn't have any of that. They went in and they were probably malnourished and trying to fight. So I'm going to assume, okay? So, thank you, Miss Diane. I mean, I can tell you this, like I remember my dad was in Vietnam, and he told me a bunch of stories, but one I can share is that he was sitting down, he'd just been marching out and been doing a bunch of stuff, and he sat, and it was raining, and they were all getting ready to eat their MREs, right? They kind of cranked open all the tins of things, and they were just about to get there, and then all of a sudden a firefight broke out, And he threw down his stuff, did this firefight, did everything, assessed the damage afterwards, everybody, and then they were like, they only had so much food. And they were out in the middle of nowhere. And he was like looking for his food afterwards, and he said he found it. It was in mud, covered in ants, and that was it. That was his food that he had. And he said, I did what I said. He said, I just ate it. He said, I considered that extra protein for me today. So you would eat what you had, right? And I guess the opportunity to, I'm not condoning eating raw meat like that and just slaughtering an animal and just eating it. But obviously they were hungry enough, even though the Israelites knew better, right? And this, I'm going to go back to, what's that?
That would be a human characteristic.
Yeah.
I want what I want when I want it.
Oh, well, sure. But who was their leader? Who was their leader, though, right? Saul was basically that type of leader, though. I want what I want when I want it. Okay, what verse are we at? 31, thank you. All right. You shall not behave this way toward the Lord your God, for they have done for their gods every repulsive thing which the Lord hate. Oh no, sorry, I'm in wrong. I was reading Deuteronomy. Still in Deuteronomy there. Okay, so back to. Wow. Okay. Right. So they rushed greedily on the spoil. They took the sheep. You violated the law and acted treacherously. Roll a great stone to me. Spread out. Do all of that. So that each night, down second half of 35, or just second half of 34. So that night each one brought his ox with him and butchered it there. And Saul built an altar to the Lord, and it was the first altar that he built to the Lord. Okay. So the large stone was rolled. He used that altar. If you go back and you actually read about in Deuteronomy talking about how they should slaughter animals and do all of that, it's literally on a stone. They drain it. They pour the blood out on the altar. They, consume the meat then from that way. Everything's good. So this is all kind of ties in together, all of that. And then into verse 36. Don't worry, I'm going to come back to the vow. I still am coming back to that, unless somebody else has any questions or anything like that. Nothing? Okay. All right. Then Saul said, let us go down after the Philistines by night and plunder them until the morning light. And let us not leave a man of them alive, they said. They said, do whatever seems good to you. Then the priest said, let us approach God here. Saul asked counsel of God, shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you hand them over to Israel? But he did not answer him that day. Then Saul said, come here, all you who are leaders of the people. Let us find out about this sin causing God's silence that happened today. For as the Lord lives, who saves Israel, for even if the guilt is in my son Jonathan, he shall most certainly die. Now, this is another vow, right? So here we've got two vows that we're going to talk about. He first says, don't eat anything because of this, and now, if there is sin, my son's going to die. Or if it's my son's fault, he'll even die. Now, a lot of commentary that I read, and from what I can tell, is that Saul did not know what Jonathan had done. Nobody told him. Nobody said anything to him like, hey, by the way, Saul ate some honey, so if you don't hear from God, that's going to be why. He didn't, because then he wouldn't need to do what he's about to do, right? So he would have just known and said, oh, Jonathan, it's time to go. But not one of the people answered him. Then he said to all the Israelites, you shall be on one side, and I and my son will be on the other side. Then the people said to Saul, do what seems good to you. Therefore Saul said to God, the Lord, the God of Israel, give a perfect lot to identify the transgressor. So, and then Saul and Jonathan were selected. So now they're split. They've got the people, the leader of the people. They draw lots, or they roll. So there's these two things that they had, and it's not in that version. That's amazing. They don't call it that. I'm in Amplified, but in ESV they call it what it is. It's yes, the Thummim and the Lilum, I think, is what it is. So there's what's that?
Isn't it the Urim and the Thummim?
Ummim and Lilum, yeah. So the stones. So the priests have this thing on their chest, and they have the stones in there, and it's basically like drawing lots. So they'll, whatever side or whatever colored stone is drawn or whatever will basically be God's answer to a question that would have. Not a magic 8-ball. We're not doing anything like, soothsaying or anything like that. This was just what was an accepted way to have God speak to you for an answer. A quick answer at that, too. Like, immediately, right? So the fact that nothing was happening, and some other things to talk about how actually Saul had dreams and visions, and God would answer Saul in dreams and visions. So if these didn't work, that often did, and nothing. So Saul didn't have any dreams or visions that night. They didn't have any answer from the priests for what was going on. So now he's like, we've got to do this. They draw these lots, and he is now separated. Him and his son are separated from the people. And now he has to go, well, obviously, God, I didn't do anything wrong, right? So now let's draw lots just to see. Let's just see if maybe, me or Jonathan had sin. So then they draw lots again, and now it is Jonathan who is brought up. And then Saul said on verse 42, then Saul said, cast the lot between me and my son Jonathan. And Jonathan was taken. Then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. And Jonathan told him, I tasted a little honey with the tip of the staff that was in my hand. Here I am, I will die. And Saul said, God, do so to me and more also. You shall surely die, Jonathan. Okay, we're going to pause right there. I've read that verse several times because as somebody who does acting and that, you want to know how something's supposed to be said. There's no direction on here, right? But I've read that verse so many different times because I wanted to see how it was said, right? The commentary, basically the directorial, you should say this with longing in your heart, or sorrow, or something like that. This one is very plain and terse, right? Here I am, I shall die. But then so many other versions of this actually have it to where it's like, here I am, I guess I'll die. Basically in his father's face. I know the oath that you made, and now that I'm going to die, it's all on you. It's very much like that, in the sense of my death is your fault, Dad, just so you're aware. So, he's very much that, not that snarky teenage son, but just that, I know what you did was wrong, and here are your consequences. So now, let's talk about oaths, or vows. Okay. Okay, let's go. Proverbs 20:25. Proverbs 20:25. I have to find it right there. Somebody have that?
It is a trap to dedicate something rashly, and only later to consider one's vows.
Okay. So, Saul made let's say, a hasty vow. If Your Bible might even have it labeled, that section, Saul's hasty or rash vow, right? So that's his, he did something without thinking. We already know what his vow said. He said, I want vengeance on my enemies. Nobody eats until it's done. And you'll be cursed if you do. And the cursing at this point is death. Let's see. Deuteronomy 23. We're going back into, I'll read this one here real quick. 23, 21 through 23. If you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay fulfilling it, for the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. But if you refrain from vowing, you will not be guilty of sin. You shall be careful to do what has passed your lips, for you have voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth. That is in the law. That is, that's about vowing.
So a vow and a promise are synonymous.
In a sense, yes. I mean, a vow to the Lord. So this is what they're saying, is if you're going to make a vow, you better be aware of what you're vowing, right?
Because we don't use the word vow that much.
Right.
Or we use the word promise a lot.
Right. I promise.
I promise you.
I promise. That, what does the kid say? Cross my heart. I hope it says kneel in my promise, right? That's a vow, right? So yes, okay. Let's look at Judges 11, and this is another vow. I really kind of went down this whole vow rabbit hole. No, go ahead.
Is it the one where the daughter?
Yes.
Ooh,
Yes. This is horrible.
It is.
It's absolutely horrible. Okay. Does anybody want to read it, or you want me to read it? 30 through 37. 30 through 37. Okay, so I'll give you a backstory here, okay? Judges, there's a judge called Jephthah. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but hold your tongue and say I don't know. Jephthah. Sound like Daffy Duck here. So Jephthah was a judge for about 6 years, and he was kind of kicked out of the land of Israel and then brought back, and he had the Israelites promise him that if he came back, he would be a leader over Israel as a judge. And because of the way that he was kicked out and everything, and he was brought back, all of this was good. He was a valiant warrior, okay? He was, that's why they wanted him to come back, because they were at war with the Ammonites. And so Jephthah goes through, he is fighting, and then, who's going to read that? Mary, are you going to read that? No? I guess I'll read this real quick. Okay. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said, if you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the Ammonites shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering. Such a great thing, like of his house. Right? I mean, maybe he didn't like his cat, he didn't like his dog. He was like, meh, yeah, we got this, God. Give me the Ammonites, and whatever comes out the door, I will give that as a burnt offering.
And he went so specific with it.
I mean, he was very specific.
First thing I see on the way home, I will.
Right. So Jephthah crossed over to the Ammonites to fight against them, and the Lord gave them into his hand. Right? He made a vow. God fulfilled the vow. Let's go home, guys. And where are we at? So Jephthah, and then he struck them from Aroer to the neighborhood of Minnith, 20 cities, and as far as Abel-Keramim, with a great blow. So the Ammonites were subdued before the people of Israel. Then Jephthah came to his home in Mizpah, and behold, his daughter came out to meet him with tambourines and with dances. She was his only child, because besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. And as soon as he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, "Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low, and you have become the cause of great trouble for me." No, Jephthah, I think that was you. "For I have opened my mouth to the Lord and cannot take back my vow." So she goes on. I mean, this girl, she's a woman, okay? She just says, she goes, yeah, she could have been like, "Dad, what were you thinking?" But she goes, "Out of your mouth, let it be," basically, and let me time to mourn myself and get prepared mentally for this and spiritually. And he offers her up as a burnt sacrifice. I mean, right there. So, I mean, you got to think, like, who's coming out of your front door, right? I mean, what are they expecting somebody to throw, like, a chicken out? Like, "Hey, we're going to have dinner later." Right. Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so that is a horrible, horrible vow. Along with what Saul did. But now I'm going to kind of give you an uplifting vow, okay? Because I found a good uplifting vow. Because I didn't want to end it right there. Yeah, don't end it on that, right? No, not good. So we've got Genesis 28. This is only 2 verses. Does somebody want to read this? Ethan, I'm going to let you read that. No. Genesis 28. That is good. I like that one a lot. It's really bloody, though. I mean, if you think about that, that's like, there's a lot of blood in that vow. Genesis 28, 20 through 22.
Then Jacob made a vow, saying, "If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, then will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace. And the Lord shall be my God. And this stone, which I have set up for the pillar, shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give a tenth back to you."
Good vow, right? If God provides for me, I will make the Lord my God, and I will worship him forever, and I will give you a tenth of of all of my stuff. Not a bad vow to have. Before we go on, I'm going to share my vow. So some of my kids know this, but basically, I'm here today because of a vow. My sister, when I was 13-ish, my sister and I, we were a Christian, American Christian family. We didn't really go to church or anything like that. And my sister got saved, and she was dating this guy. It worked out. Now my sister beforehand was a heathen. I mean, our whole family were heathens. You know, my sister got married to a guy, pregnant before she was married, got divorced, crazy stuff, abuse, all sorts of things. My family was really just crazy. And my sister got saved, got my parents to go to church. I was like, wow, that's weird. Like, you know, no big deal. And so I was the only person that wouldn't go to church. I was like, that's stupid. I don't want to do that at all. But my sister, we were very honest with one another. My sister and I hated each other, first off. I will say this immensely. We did not get along. But we looked out for each other when we could. So, like, she would do me a favor, I would do her a favor, whatever. And then, so I had owed her a favor. And I knew that I owed her a favor, and she knew that I owed her a favor. And she said, "Hey, you remember that favor that you owe me?" And I was like, "Yeah, what do you want?" She goes, "I want you to go to church." And I was like, that's not cool. You're tricking me. And she's like, "But you said that you would do me a favor someday." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." So I honored that favor, and I went to church. And I said, she dropped me off in front of the youth group building, and she's like, "Okay, have fun." And I was like, whoa, you said go to church with you. She's like, "Yeah, you went to church with me. Now you're in the youth group building." It's like, touche, that's fair. So I ended up going to church. I was the last one in my family to get saved, and lots of things were restored, and there's a lot of other stuff there. But so some vows can be good, right? Jacob's vow, good vow. My vow, good vow. Saul, not so much. Jephthah, definitely not a good vow. Okay? Definitely not a good vow. Okay. All right. Moving on. All right, let's go back to... All right, I think we're right about... All right. Remember, Saul is selfish. He wants to push and push and push and go to do things. That's why he wanted to, just keep on going. He didn't really care about the fact that the guys didn't eat, but until they started sinning. His selfishness was, he didn't even want to give a full rest to the people, right? He said the vow ends at sundown. But even then, he was like, let's keep going. So he goes, they don't go on, he finds out, now we're here, we're at Jonathan, right? Okay. Verse... What's that? 45. Okay, thank you. Then the people said to Saul, shall Jonathan die, who has worked this great salvation in Israel? Far from it. As the Lord lives, there shall not one hair of his head fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day. So the people ransomed Jonathan so that he did not die. All right. So Saul was just ready to kill his son. Okay? He was like, Jonathan, I'm sorry, so sorry. You failed. You ate something, and now we're going to have to kill you. But the people that he fought alongside and helped lead, they were smarter than Saul, right? They saw what Saul did, okay? So they ransomed. Now, I tried to find out what they actually ransomed. No, there's no nobody knows what was actually given for that. Rescued, right. So you would think, though, that if he was rescued, right, we're going to steal Saul away, or we're going to steal Jonathan away from his dad's going to be like, I kind of know where he lives. He's my son. But, so the idea is that they basically they either gave burnt sacrifices, they pledged something or did something that was, that saved Jonathan. Yeah. He made it to God. What's
What does God do? God just honors your vow, even if it's up to me, and it goes off. So
That's where I was going with my God.
Nope, that's great.
In his human stupidity, make a promise that God had nothing to do with. Where do we hear
Well, don't.
that God required that of him?
says that the people rose up and ransomed Jonathan from that vow.
Right.
What if back to where that, I'm going back to the garden. What if the mother would have come out and said, oh, no, maybe we can do this? I mean, and God knew the vow was made, and he still allowed the victory to come, knowing that that vow was there. I'm trying to think, how does God come into this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean,
Broke the vow.
what's that?
Their words broke the vow. They spoke, and that's what broke the vow. The ring.
Maybe. I mean, Saul. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Thinking, he just got everything backwards. He didn't go to God. He should have gone to God first. So instead, he just decided what he's going to do, make this stupid vow. Then he goes to the people and says, well, what do you think we should do? And they said, well, do whatever you think you want to do. Then the priest says, why don't we ask God about it? So it just shows when you don't do things in the order of which God prescribes you to do them, you screw stuff up.
Right. So, to go a little bit back from that, Saul is the king at this point, right? The king of Israel, and so he is the covering almost of Israel. So, I mean, his words are law. His words are right there. And, you know, you would think that he would have the discernment, you would think that he would have the mental capacity of understanding what he's doing. But he's very rash, he's very self-absorbed, he is just constantly just like that. Now before they even go and start to try to rout the Philistines, it even says that he calls the priest over to find out if they should go do it. And he said, nope, don't do that. Don't bring the ark, or just let's go and fight. So he doesn't even take the time to actually say, should we actually do this? He looked at the situation. Now, I will give him, he did good because he kind of looked at the situation and said, we've got them on the run, we should continue, right? Like Jonathan had the favor, he did everything that he was supposed to do, all of that. So that could be seen as a good thing. But then he goes and he makes a vow of like, I want my vengeance on them for that. So now granted, maybe if he would have said, if he actually talked to God and said, God has said, none shall eat before, right, this is all.
He's not submitted to the Lord, because he didn't hear from God. It specifically said if he didn't get an answer, he just went off on his own. He's not submitted to the Lord. So
Right.
he's not submitted to the Lord, even though he's the king and he's the covering.
Right, submitting to God is key.
Yeah.
Submitting to God is key. He was not submitting. Yes, sir.
Well, I had thought a bit ago, 'cause I think I always looked at these vows, and I looked at the one with
Jephthah?
that guy.
No.
He, sacrifices his daughter. And I always kind of looked at it, well, this wasn't of God. This was just a man's vow. But what we just read, where the Bible says if you make a vow, you got to keep it, shows that technically whatever you vow, you kind of have to keep. So I'm curious what the thoughts of everybody here. Like, well, does that mean that Jephthah was not in sin for killing his daughter? Because it was basically, in order to keep the vow, he had to.
It doesn't say that he was in sin. It doesn't. I mean, if you read that and it goes on, I mean, it goes on and just like doesn't skip a beat. Like, okay, burnt offering, daughter, we're good, and we're going, and that's it. I mean,
I think it would be different if you vowed to do something that you know is a sin. Like, oh, if it's full moon tonight, I'm gonna go murder this man. I'm gonna go rob a bank. But you know that it's obviously wrong. But he didn't know his daughter.
he didn't know, and his vows were set. I mean, Jephthah that even saw. It sounds like a good vow, right? Nobody should eat until vengeance is taken upon the enemies. Now, I mean, his enemies and my vengeance, but not God's vengeance and not God's enemies. Where Jephthah's side was, God, grant me the strength, grant me everything, and if I win, I will do this. It sounds great. It sounds like that's a really good vow. I will do this, except for that whole part of somebody coming out of the front of my house or something.
That comes to me is, for one thing, the reason we shouldn't be hasty about promises and vows is because our words don't just affect us, it affects other people.
Correct.
And both of them, I mean, it would have been different if Saul would have said, I vow that I will not eat
Right.
until I see, and it only involved him. But when we make vows and it has repercussions into the lives of those around us,
Yep.
then that's where we start getting into trouble. And there's one thing to make a vow for yourself, but it's another thing, and we do it hastily, not looking at, like Nicole said, looking ahead a little bit, I'm thinking now I can understand why the people's hearts turned so quickly to David, and even Jonathan's heart to David, because this guy was very erratic. And
Yes.
you have a leader like this, and it's not going to work.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's,
Hasty in a way that affects everybody.
yep, 100%.
Now, if I made a vow to God and said something like,
Right. Right. I don't like it when somebody else makes plans for me. Like, I don't want somebody to make a vow for me either, okay? Yes, sir.
A verse that came to mind, I had to look it up, but Pastor Don has actually told me this many times before, but it's James 5, 7, 12. But above all, my brethren, do not swear either by heaven or by earth, or any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, lest you fall into judgment.
Yes. That was on my list, so that's good. Yep. Very good. What's that? Can you say that louder? What? It's James what? I want to read it.
James 5, 12.
Let me go there. Yes, exactly. There you go. Good. Good. Love it. All right.
I think it all comes back to just submission to authorities. You know, if you're submitted to God, your yes is supposed to be yes, and your no is supposed to be no. And I think about just like our vows, like we got vows, we got getting married. Like if
Right.
you haven't asked God, like, is this the person I'm supposed to marry? You know, that vow, you know, you're committed to it, and it's either going to go well for you or it's not going to go well for you if you're not, you know, submitted to God. So I think it all comes back just really about submission. And, you know, David was submitted to authority, even, you know, he could have killed Saul.
Right.
But Saul was not submitted.
Yeah, I think if you see a lot in the vows too, that he kept saying, God, if you do this, if you do this, then I will do it. That's like under the submission, and under submission, where it's not, God, if you do this, it's like, yes, I'll do this, or no, don't.
It's also
Yeah.
a conversation with the Lord. Like, where is God speaking in this? Like, I'm still going, where is God saying? I'm in agreement with the word.
Well, you have to think about, like, you can almost argue the point that, especially with Jephthah, he said, if you give the Ammonites into my hand and all this stuff, I will then do this, right? Or I will then do this afterwards. And then Jacob even said, you know, which was the good vow, right? Jacob said, if you supply my needs, if you give me the food and do whatever, I will make you my God, and this pillar will be your house, and all. That's a good vow, right? Like, you're not saying anything bad, and I'm going to tithe to you, all of these things. So it's not and God did those things, right? God answered Jacob. God answered Jephthah by actually letting that happen. And, you know, so I think the bad part with Saul's vow was it was all selfishness. It was all 100% selfish in the sense of nobody eats until the end of the day or until my vengeance has been quelled. And that's it. That was the vow. And if you do, you're cursed. There was nothing, like you said, there was nothing with God in that. It's all my vengeance, my selfishness. Yes, Raina.
I think if you look at, what was his name,
Jephthah. Yes.
and Joseph, or not,
Jacob.
Jacob's vow, they recognize the magnificence of the Lord by saying, like, you have the authority to do this, so I will
Sure.
give you an offering, or I will,
Mhm.
you will now become my God, and I will build these things for you. Where Saul's don't recognize like the magnificence of the Lord, it recognizes like glorifying himself.
Right. Does. Okay. Anybody else?
Can I throw a wrench out there?
You please do. I like wrenches.
This is just bugging me. I know he's giving credit to God, Jephthah, or whatever, for delivering the people to his hands, but does it actually say God delivered him to his hands?
Oh yeah, he won. He won big.
No, I know he won. But I'm asking, does the word of God say, does it credit God in that way?
Oh yeah, he does.
Okay.
He credits.
That part, so I'm like, are we?
Yeah, that's the
are we
really
sure
that's the really crazy part. Like, he credits him. He like thanks it. You know, all this stuff. But then it's like, oh, why why did you have to come out of my door, right? Like, yeah, he was a fool. Yeah, and he knows he's a fool at that point. You know, you see your daughter walk out of the thing, and you're like, that's not the burnt offering that I want to do, right?
He was going to say, stop, send your mom out.
Oh, no. Send the cat out. Send the dog out. Throw a chicken out there, right? Something. Don't. Maybe he didn't think anybody was going to come out. That's another question I actually had when I was reading it. Was he not thinking that anyone was going to come and greet him? Yeah. That was a thought that I had. Okay. As we go on.
Can I say something about 47, I think?
40. We're not at 47 yet, are we? Did we? Okay, we got to 47. All right. Go ahead. Since we've read it, you can say it. We haven't read it. Okay. Then go ahead. You could still say something ahead of it.
Well, actually, it was 45.
Okay, then definitely.
And then it stood up to Saul.
Yes.
And I often think about is this, I would imagine knowing Saul as, egotistical narcissist that he is, this would be where he would start his hatred for his own son. Because, we have the song that David slew, I don't know.
It's Saul slew his thousands. David slew his tens of thousands. Yes.
Whenever Saul's outdone, you're not very happy.
No, he's not.
I just wondered if this might be the start of the hatred.
I think it has something to do with it. I think Saul's own ego has something to do with it. Insecurities, yes, exactly.
Because by the fact that they stood up to him for his son and ransomed him,
Yeah.
showing Jonathan that favor, must have, could have started
They
that
also
seed
told,
of-
they also told him what he did, how he stood up.
Yeah.
Didn't do that.
Right. Saul was in the back waiting for something to happen, waiting for something. And then Jonathan and his armor bearer did something. Saul took advantage of what his son did and continued to follow on with it, and then made a proclamation that was stupid. Yes.
Well, that made me think of something really interesting because whenever people are insecure, they often overcompensate.
Sure.
And so this is almost like his over-righteous, like, well, I gotta show people that I gotta lead. I gotta show that I can, I can take the house. And I'm also very spiritual. We'll see.
Yes.
So he's like, well, I gotta do something. I have to do something really big. I can't just be like, let's do this, guys. So he makes this outrageous vow. And I never thought of it as like compensation before. And that makes sense because I have once in my life where I'm a little insecure. Like, well, that person's a lot better than that. Well, I guess I need to just take it all. If I'm gonna make it work, I'm gonna make it all work. And so it's like you go way beyond what you should do just to show that you can.
I mean,
And you might as well bring down the person who's doing it better than you are while you're at it.
it's very true, especially when you look at what we know about Saul, and we know about as his kingship goes through, right? When David is anointed as king, the Spirit of God leaves him, inhabits David. Saul is, I know we're getting into Samuel 15, 16, 17 through this, but you go through and Saul is possessed and afflicted by evil spirit, and he ends up chucking a spear at David because he doesn't. And you have to think like he's overcompensating for the idea of I used to have what David had. Now I don't, and I don't want that even there, even though it was helping him. So.
I know we're not there yet.
But please.
I have a question, sort of piggyback off what he was saying. That Saul was basically fighting for his ego right now.
Yes.
In the next verse, he stopped pursuing the Philistines.
Okay.
Is that because he knew that he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to defeat them? But then he assumed rule over Israel and started fighting valiant or
He's trying to show that he's a good king. Yeah. So it's a little bit of that. What we know of the way that Samuel was written, especially, is this is the way the rest of 47 through 52. 47 through 52 basically is basically a quick summary of Saul's kingship. It says, and we'll read it real quick. When Saul had taken the kingship over Israel, he fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab, against the Ammonites, against Edom, against the kings of Zobah, against the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he routed them. And he did valiantly and struck the Amalekites and delivered Israel out of the hands of those who plundered him. So those verses, that's basically just a quick summary of it. So even though, he did do great things. And one commentary that I looked at said, we can't discount the good that Saul did by looking at the bad, all the bad things as well. You do have to look at the good that he did. So God's hand was obviously upon him in the sense of, for a while anyway, that he did have victories in battle. He did set up the land that David can take over, right? So there was some good there. Though how he did it is kind of like, not always great. You don't want to, we can go through all of our presidents, U.S. presidents, and say, oh, look at all the good that they did, right? But then we have to also look at all the bad things that they did along with that. And I know no U.S. president has ever done anything bad, so it's okay. Not currently, anyway. Okay. Okay, now the sons, and we're just kind of tying up loose ends here with 14. Now the sons of Saul were Jonathan, Ishvi, and Malchishua. And the names of his two daughters were these. The names of the firstborn were Merab, and the name of the younger, Michael. And the name of Saul's wife was Anahem, and and she was the daughter of Ahimaaz. Yep. And the name of the commander of his army was Abner, the son of Ner, Saul's uncle. Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner, the father of Abner, was the son of Abiel. There was hard fighting against the Philistines all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he attached him to himself. So there's a couple of things in here that I wanted to kind of look at. Who were the sons of Saul? Huh? Right. Except we're missing one. We are missing one. What is his name? Does anybody remember? Besides? Shibabeth. Yes. Exactly. He was a cripple. He is not listed here. Nope. No. Nope. That is Saul's son. Remember, Jonathan at that point is dead at what you're thinking of. No. Yeah, Jonathan doesn't have kids. I'm 100% sure that is not Jonathan's son. He was in Saul's family. Nope. No. Why is he not mentioned?
Because it seems like Saul very much values war and warrior, and if he was not able to fight, then he was probably not valuable to him.
Probably.
It doesn't even mention it until later when David finds out about it.
Right.
They didn't acknowledge him because he was not fighting.
Maybe. Especially if you look at the last verse in there. And when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he attached them to himself. So Saul, now a little bit of this is speculation, I will say, but a lot of it talks about how Saul's son, Shibabeth, I can't pronounce it. What? Yeah, something. It's hold on. I have it here in my notes. If I can go back there. There it is. Okay. Ishibabeth. Ishishab. Yeah. He's not mentioned, okay? And there is another name for Ishibabeth. It's Eshbal. And that translates into man of shame. So that is very much, it seems like that is not a good, is it Jonathan's son? Wow.
He said there is still a son of Jonathan that is crippled in his feet. But it says Saul's house.
Saul's house.
Saul's house is the son of Jonathan.
Well, I'll be corrected then. And so is Pastor Sean, because him and I actually had the same notes after we were looking at them. So Pastor Sean, if you're watching this, we're wrong. All right. I thought it was Saul's son still. Okay. I'm good enough to know that I'm right when I'm wrong. So thank you for pointing that out. If y'all, I know you will. I know you will. Don't worry. Okay. I wanted to go back to talk about 52. Go back to 1 Samuel 8 because I know we've already read that, right? I wasn't in here, but I know that we did read 1 Samuel verse 8. Okay, and then go to verse 11. Now this kind of, 1 Samuel 8, chapter 8, verse 11. Okay? And this kind of ties into, remember, Saul is the first king of Israel. The people wanted a king. They wanted to be like the other nations. They wanted that so much. So actually we'll read 10 too. So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking for a king from him. He said, "These will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots and to be his horsemen and to run before his chariots, and he will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and some to plow his ground and to reap his harvest and to make his implements of war and equipment and chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers." So all of these things, Saul is basically fulfilling that right there, just by even in verse 52, saying, I'm going to take all the valiant men. I'm going to take all the people who are strong, who, and I think it ties into what Ethan said, his ego. He needed strong men to be around him. He needed those things because he wasn't strong enough. He knew he wasn't strong enough, and he was, compensating for that. But he was also doing what God said he was going to do. God said, he's going to take your sons and your daughters. He's going to take your sons and make them fight for him. And the people still wanted it. The people still said, that's good. We're happy with that. Verse 15, or chapter 15, goes into show more of, and I know we'll talk about that next week, but shows more of what and how Saul was listening to himself, right? He thought he was doing good for God. Yes, sir.
Do you think that,
Sometimes.
while it is important to remember that he did good, do you think, because it doesn't technically say, not that I'm aware of, that what intentions he had? Because you can do great things for the wrong reasons.
Sure.
So in all that time, it doesn't necessarily say if he was crediting God in it or if he was crediting himself. But since the fact that he built a altar or a statue on his first victory, or one of his first big victories,
He built an altar because the people were sinning, and he needed to cover that. And, go ahead, finish what you're saying.
that is hard to, I don't know.
I think it's even more interesting because when you think about it, I think that Saul thought that the people were the cause of the not the because he was so confident in the fact that they were sinning, right? It doesn't even say that God was upset that they were sinning in there. Now, we know God's not like, oh, that's fine, I'm not going to look at that, right? Especially here. Now, I'm sure God was not happy with the people sinning, but that's not the main reason, right? It was because of Saul's vow, and it was, now you have to pay for your vow. So.
One of the reasons David was so much more successful than Saul was because he worshipped God as well, and he pursued that.
Yes.
Like even immediately, even out at his young age, he was already outdoing Saul. And so you think that Saul, like going into that, it's not just like stumble here and stumble there. It's actively pursuing something that isn't God that makes you really not victorious in God's scheme of things, and that he could have been much more victorious if he had been.
I think so personally, but I mean, what ifs are always interesting. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think your question of whether motives, whether because of Saul's motives his work is corrupted or not, right? That's what you're asking. Is whether or not, sure, he did some great things, he conquered people and stuff, but because he did it out of the wrong spirit, was it that? I think not, because several times in the Bible, people who did things for others, I think of Rahab, who helped the Israelites. But why she helped them? Because she doesn't want to die, But it was counted to her as righteousness even then.
Yeah, well, she saw what God did.
Yeah.
She saw actually, like Rahab, I mean, she saw not the glory of God, but she saw the people. She understood that, and I think that I think especially, yes, she might have been trying to save her own life and her own family, but I think she did that in a way of like honoring God in a sense as well. She, right, right. Sundays, term, she had a fear of God. She had a reverential fear of God, probably, in that sense of, I see the spies, I'm going to hide them, and God, she probably didn't even think that God could bless her because she just did that out of reverential fear. I know we're going to be talking about 1 Samuel 15 next week, but a lot of this, that goes into the idea of, what Saul did and when Saul is rejected by God. He literally goes against what God says and then tries to blame it on the people again, right? He talks about going and fighting the Amalekites. I think it's the Amalekites, right? Yeah. Goes and fights the Amalekites, and God says, kill them all. Don't let a single one live. Kill everything in their land. Don't leave one thing standing, right? They go through, they kill everybody, except for the king, and except for the best sheep and the best things and all this stuff. And, I mean, if Saul's with them, he's going through and he's saying, well, keep the king here, it's not right to kill the king right now or whatever. And yeah, I guess nobody's looking, so go ahead. And Samuel comes through and says, why do I hear the bleating of sheep and the mooing of oxen, right? So and then he goes on and tries to blame the people. Well, the people wanted to keep the best so they can offer them as a sacrifice, right? But that's next week. We won't talk about that this week. Anyway, any further comments? Yes.
I get you to go to 1 Chronicles.
You can.
8, chapter 8, verse 33. I want to make your day.
You're going to make my day?
8:33.
Ner was the father of Kish, Kish the son of Jonathan, Malachishu, Ashura, Abner, and Eshbal. There you go. Thank you.
So either the Bible's got something
And the son of Jonathan was Maribel, and Maribel was the father of Micah. Where does it say that Ishbosheth was? Mephibosheth, Ishbosheth. Yeah, which one is it? Okay.
And David said, is there still anyone left of the house of Saul that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? Now there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba, and they called him to David, and the king said to him, are you Ziba? And he said, I am your servant. And the king said, is there not still someone of the house of Saul that I may
I
show
see where
him
the
kindness
confusion's
for
in.
to him? And Ziba said, there is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in his feet. And the king said to him, where is he? So,
This is a different son. This is a different person. Mephibosheth is that son. The other son, whose name translates into Eshbaal, is a different one, and it's Ishosheth. And he also was crippled. So there was two. That was in like deep commentary that I found. So, yes.
What about Kalishaleth?
Kalishaleth.
So second Kings 4:4 says the same thing.
That there's
It said Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son who was lame in both feet.
yes.
He was 5 years old when news about Saul.
Right, that's Mephibosheth.
Ishbosheth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ishbosheth is somebody else, but I had read that, and I can't remember. I'd have to pull it up to find it. But it's not. Yeah. But there was commentary that it was either because he was disabled or not capable of fighting. So, and that's why also the name translates to man of shame. So.
and the way he did things. I should say, I don't get the impression that Saul really had a heart after God, nor did he really know God in the ways of God or in the character of God. And he fell to his own devices, what he thought would be right or what he thought would please God, or even maybe didn't even consider, I don't know. I mean, we will contrast him with David, even though David was flawed too. He had his flaws.
Oh, sure.
He didn't have a heart after God.
I think that
Saul seems to be oblivious to what God is all about.
I think Saul had a heart after Saul, and like
Do you
seriously,
think it started out that way though? 'Cause I feel like there's a lot of, I'll just say it, a lot of mega church pastors that start out good, and the bigger they get, it gets to be about them. And I think Saul may have started out with a pure heart, but then as he became who he was, it goes to his head and it becomes all about the king.
I mean, he had to have started out good because the glory, the spirit of God was upon him, right? So, as little as I know about God, because there's an infinite amount to know, I can safely say that God would not be on something that what did not at one time please him or was not good, right? I think we can all, that God's spirit wouldn't be upon something that was not what God wanted him. He didn't want the kings, but the spirit of God still was upon Saul.
But your gifts still authenticate your character.
Correct, yeah.
And that's what creates the problem he's talking
Right.
about. Is your gifts are given to you, or he came upon Saul, but his character was never
Right.
there.
He was anointed.
My big picture summary is that it really, I think, great
he set up the nation of Israel really like in a position to where David could then step in and take over.
If they hadn't conquered them,
Right. Now,
then David couldn't have.
I mean, chapter 15 talks about, that whole Amalekite, failure, and then that's exact. It goes on to even say that Samuel basically, I mean, it says God regretted putting Saul in charge, and
Even Samuel even told them before Saul became king,
you're
this
gonna,
is what's going to happen.
this is what's going to happen.
And they said, we don't care, we want a king.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, and man, I did so much reading and everything, like for 15 and everything, and you're talking about even kind of Samuel falls into the trap of what is supposed to be a king. And I know we're pretty much close to being done, but like he goes to the sons of Jesse, right? And he looks at the sons of Jesse, and he's like, that one, he's going to be the king. Totally get it. Looks like a good one. I can only imagine that this guy was probably like, boom. He was Jason, basically. Like, just big, buff, strong. Like, yeah, that's the king right there. And it's like, no, sorry, that's not, nothing against, I mean, Jason, you're a king of a man to me, don't worry. But, instead he takes the little shepherd boy, right? Like, anyway. All right. Oh, what's that? Oh, Terry, you had something?
Well, I was just thinking back on chapter 13 when Saul did the sacrifice when he wasn't supposed to.
Right.
And he didn't wait on Samuel. He didn't wait as God had commanded him. And so Samuel told Saul in 13:13 that he had acted foolishly. And then he goes on to tell him, now your kingdom shall not endure. So Saul knew that he had already kind of lost favor with God because of his foolish act.
Mm-hmm.
So I sit there and I wonder when he gets to trying to do the oath and is he trying to win favor back with God somehow?
Maybe.
To win it? I just kind of wondered if there might be.
I think it ties in with that, like maybe he's trying to do that, and then what Ethan said is ego, kind of like trying to compensate for the failures that you have. Like, listen, I've done stupid things in my life. I know, shocker. My kids, don't be surprised. I've done some stupid things. But you kind of make up for that, like compensation of like, when you're like, I failed miserably, so I'm going to do something so much bigger to try to overcome that like small failure, or that what I think is a small failure, or that big failure. I got to go bigger, right? You got to do more to cover up that thing. I mean, yeah, show God that, hey, that little thing that I did, that sacrifice that I kind of did wrong, like, look at what I did. Look here. Like, this is so much better. Don't mind that oath that almost got my son killed, but it's one of those. So
So it seems like when we get desperate, we make
stupid
stupid decisions.
decisions, yes. Stupid vows, stupid promises, stupid things that come out of your mouth.
Do it on desperation. As Pastor Sean previously talked about, and Graham brought out that David's reaction was to go with Pharaoh.
Right.
That Saul's reaction never.
So, yeah,
It goes back to what do you go to when you're desperate?
right. If we just do what we want to do when we're desperate, or what we think that is right, that's not what we should do. It should be relying on God to show you, or going to God in your desperation outright. If we go to flesh, we get decay. That's what's going to happen to flesh.
When Saul screwed up, he tried to fix it. When David screwed up, he fell on his face.
Right.
And I think a big difference there is that David was walking in communion with the Lord, so his first instinct was to pray, to ask for help. Where Saul wasn't. Well, except on that.
Yep.
Something I never realized until recently when I was listening to a podcast by John Rivera, and it points out that so David, Jesus, and all these big people
And yeah, and it is. I think to kind of bring back a little bit like what Tara was talking about a leader as well. Like he was a leader and he really kind of put himself, like it was all about himself, right? When you said when a good leader leads well, you give glory to God. But even in a secular setting, a good leader doesn't take the win, right? It always goes back out into my team or the people, all of the people that helped me. What we did. This was Saul was always about what I did, what I want, all of this. And when you're that selfish, you're going to make mistakes because you're not looking out for anybody else but yourself and the glory that you can get, right? So, don't be like Saul, right? Okay. Anybody else? We're good? Okay, well, let's pray real quick. Lord, we thank you so much for this time that we get to spend digging into your word, God, and we ask that you would just take this and write it upon our hearts, God. Let us have discernment with it, God, and I ask that you would bless this time. Again, bless Pastor Sean and Celeste as they're relaxing, and Lord, we ask that you would just continue to be with us as a body, Lord, that you would continue to strengthen us, and that you would just let us be in the center of your will. In your name we pray. And we pray again for Linda, and we are anticipating a great report from her. And we thank you for that. In your name we pray. Amen.